And the final game, Dalton, that we're talking about in rivalry weekend, one that obviously has big implications not only on the ACC but on Louisville as well, is Florida State going on the road to Florida in the Swamp, 7 p.m. Eastern time on ESPN. And the big storyline, obviously, maybe even college football right now, is Florida State now without their leader in Jordan Travis, who suffered a gruesome leg injury in the win over North Alabama this past weekend. And it goes without saying that he's one of the best quarterbacks in college football. I mean, his 92 grade over the last 2 seasons is tied for fifth among all quarterbacks in college football in that span. He is their leader. We interviewed him. He's a terrific kid as well. Awful blow for him. And we feel for Jordan. Awful blow for Florida State as well. But listen, man, this is still an 11-0 football team. And like we said before, they go undefeated. They win these next two games. They're in the playoff. I don't care who's starting a quarterback for them. They need to be in the college football playoff as a 13-0 Power 5 champion if they win these next two games. But it won't be easy, man, because you go into the Swamp late at night for a Florida team that is right now 5-6, meaning they need to win a game in order to make a bowl game. They need to win this game to make a bowl game. This is going to be a tough test for Tate Rodemaker in this one, man. But yeah, obviously significant blow to Florida State's national championship aspirations this past Saturday, but they are still very, very much alive to play for a national championship, make the college football playoff.
Yeah, it's just awful. I mean, it honestly, and I know some people. There was a lot of people doubting them. Oh, they play down to certain teams. They get off to slow starts. This and that. Look, they had a team. Well, they wouldn't have been the favorite. Obviously, everyone's going to favor Georgia right now, but they have a team with Jordan Travis that could have won a national title. They had a chance. They did. I think right now you're down to even like if we like Louisville maybe to make the playoff, we wouldn't pick them to win a title. Or there's only 5 or 6 teams I think that are capable of actually winning the title, right? Florida State was one of them for me with Travis, and it's just terrible. I mean, between everything he's done for them, they were down for a few years. He's worked his way to being this good. This was not like an immediate 5-star prospect. They talk about it all the time. He almost quit.
Mm-hmm.
And he came back and to become the player he did is an unbelievable job. And for it to end like that before they could really make this run now, this is the meat of the run now, having to beat the Gators. And then Louisville, it wasn't going to be an easy game with Travis. That's a really good team. And now, I think the one thing I can emphasize, because we've talked about this team enough this year, they still have, that's their goal. Look, nobody's going to disrespect them if they don't win a national title. They're not supposed to do that with Rodemaker, right? They could still make the playoff. And I think just making the playoff, they finish off these last 2 games, they should be every bit proud of everything they've done. Undefeated, make the playoff. Whatever happens, happens. Man, I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to sit here and tell you he should go in there if they're number 4 and beat Georgia. Or even if they're number 3 and beat Michigan or what have you. I don't know. But look, you've still got an elite group of receivers. You got 2 really good backs. Mm-hmm. You've got Jarrett Verse is going to be in the top 20 in the draft. Told you they are somewhere. If they're not number 1, they're one of like the 3 best groups of corners in football. Jerrion Jones is an absolute monster. Mm-hmm. Cypress on the back end. They've got so many guys on their team that make this a good football team. This was not Jordan Travis just carrying them. They're more well-rounded than people think. And I think Rodemaker, to be honest, at least for these 2 games, I think he can do it, man. I'm going to be honest. Last week, okay, North Alabama, but it's also, look, he wasn't expecting to play in that game until it was supposed to be 42-3 or whatever, and they were struggling early. He came in that game, they were behind. This is the other thing, too, this is the one criticism of Florida State. They get off to slow starts. Well, they did it against I think it was North Alabama, and he had to come in and still lead them back against a team that was playing actually really good football. I cannot imagine, even in that game, that he wasn't nervous as anything walking in there. Mm-hmm. And he made three big time throws, had a couple moments under pressure where it got shaky. I think that's a big thing for him. But I'll tell you what, and I went back and watched, ironically, his one start last year was against Louisville. When he throws the ball on time, when he sees his first read, I'll tell you what, he's got a pretty darn good fastball, man. I'm telling you. And last year you could see immediately he's got chemistry with Johnny Wilson already. I think if there's any team prepared to withstand this, in this situation with what they have around them. Keep in mind, too, I got another one for you. I've talked about Oregon all year with their pass protection, right? Since week 7, Florida State's actually got the best pass protection in the country.
Wow.
They have for the last 6 weeks pass protected on a level like equal with Oregon, which is crazy to think. I don't think it's a thing that gets talked about with Florida State a lot. They're more well rounded than people think, and I think you're about to find that out. Rodemaker, he can do this. Now, the big thing with him is going to be clearly late in the play when his first read isn't there. He's not going to move like Travis. He's not the athlete that Travis. He's a decent athlete, but he's not the athlete Travis is. He's not the improviser Travis is. On schedule, he can absolutely do things that can win games. Off schedule, instead of trying to play make like Travis would, be the playmaker, he's got to throw the ball away. He's got to slide. He's got to take the occasional sack. He can't mess around too much late in the play because you can tell there's a little more nervous tendency when things get past, let's say, like 3 seconds. Then it's not like that's the part where he's not the same as Jordan Travis. But I'm telling you, when he sticks his back foot in the ground, throws the ball in rhythm and sees his read, he can sling it, man. I'm not going to take anything away from him. He can really. You saw it last year in a handful of appearances, and you saw it this past week. I'm telling you, he's got a darn good arm. And when he throws the ball on time, he can make things happen.
Yeah, absolutely, can. I mean, he has an 82.7 passing grade on 84 snaps this year. I mean, look at this, is just limited sample size, of course. But yeah, I'm really anxious and excited to see what Tate Rodemaker can do in this kind of environment, in the swamp late at night. Dalton, he's not the only backup in this game. Graham Mertz suffered a broken fractured collarbone in the loss to Missouri. Close loss. Missouri barely pulled it out at the last second, but they ended up winning that game. But Florida, man, they lost not only that game, they lost their starting quarterback in Graham Mertz probably for the entire season now. So you got backup quarterback against backup quarterback with massive stakes for both teams. For Florida State, you're trying to keep your playoff hopes alive right now. For Florida, you're trying to keep your season alive, because if you lose this game, this is most likely your final game of the season, unless they have the GPA necessary to be one of the top 5 and 7 teams. But it probably is their last game of the season if they lose. So you got a back quarterback in Florida State who needs to win to make to have their playoff hopes alive. You need a Florida quarterback who needs to win in order to make a bowl game. So I'm really excited to see both these guys, man. And Max Brown, redshirt freshman for Florida, will be getting the start in this game. He has a 73.3 grade on 49 snaps this year. He did a pretty good job in that Missouri game when he had to come in. But yeah, man, I'm excited to see, because not only, is this, Florida State without Jordan Travis, but to a lesser extent, this is also, okay, what does Florida look like without Graham Mertz there, who actually, he started off slow in the season, but he's been pretty solid throughout down the stretch of the year as well. So, yeah, backup quarterback against backup quarterback is going to be very, very interesting to see in this big rivalry game.
This is going to sound funny, because obviously the Travis injury was really the story of the weekend. But for this game alone, in a vacuum, I think the Mertz injury actually has a bigger impact on the game than the Travis injury. It sounds funky, because there's a number of factors. Okay, one, Max Brown. You can see Max Brown's a lot different than Graham Mertz. This kid's an athlete. So far, what I saw last week, the best plays he made were with his feet. So I wonder if Florida gets more in kind of Billy Napier's classic like zone and boot game, get him on the move. They knew immediately. All right, Max is in the game. Like, we have to move the pocket. We have to run read option. We have to basically go in the opposite direction of what they would do with Graham Mertz, right? Ironically, of course, Hurt running the ball. Whereas I think Florida State, I don't think anything in Florida State's offense changes. I just think you just get a little less improvisation out of Rodemaker. Florida's offense distinctly changed immediately when Brown came in the game. And I think that's going to be the formula, lean even more than usual, because they already do, on ETN, on Montreal Johnson, and on Brown himself. I think running the ball with all three of those guys is going to be Florida's chance to win this game. So I'll stay on that side of the ball, because your problem is I've told you about FSU's corners. Yeah. Here's a fun one. Since week 4, ACC play, right? Florida State in coverage only allows a 27 0.3% open target percentage. Okay. Only 20%, 27% of guys targeted do they even are even open when you throw at Florida State since week 4. You want to know what the next closest number, at least in the Power 5, is?
Hit me.
41.
Jeez.
When I tell you this is not the game where you wanted to lose your starting quarterback if you're playing against Florida State, I've said it for like 3 weeks already. They are lights out in coverage. Verse gets all the spotlight, going to be a top 20 pick, the offense, all this stuff, and then the talk about, are they number 4, number 5? It really doesn't matter. If they run the table, they run the table. Their secondary is the X factor in all of this. If Travis was in there, their secondary would have been the X factor in their national title chances, and it still is to at least get there, right? This is not the game for Florida to have a backup quarterback going in there. On the other side, if you're Rodemaker and you're Florida State, this is definitely the game where this is absolutely the game where a backup quarterback can survive. First of all, what do they talk about when you have a backup in? Well, okay, let's lean on the run game, complementary, all that stuff. Florida State runs counter more than anybody, all right, and just as good as just about anybody. Been doing it since last year, been doing it since Norvell's got there. The Gators really, really struggle with their run fits. When you start pulling linemen, they struggle. I think they were in the bottom when I saw 6 or 7 against counter in the Power 5. It's just when things get moving and their linebackers have to start using their eyes and feet. If you go back and watch that Kentucky game, I'll tell you this. Now, Ray Davis, he was great in that game. He had almost 300 yards. But more than anything, what I saw was the Gators just struggling with run fits, being late, bad angles, things like that. So the run game, the core of Florida State's run game is very much there to be successful. Okay. Then you get on the back end. The Gators are 113th in the country in coverage grade now. It's gone that far down now. Now you play LSU and Missouri and find out that they really can't keep up with those guys. Luther Burden had almost 100. I think he had $160 on him. And I don't know how in the world on 4th and 17 with the game on the line is Luther Burden standing at the chains by himself.
Yeah.
I was amazed. Of all people, he was standing at the chains on 4th and 17 by himself. I don't understand it. They only have 3 interceptions. The only team in the country with less is Temple. This Gators secondary is they've just gone for a ride almost every, except for the Tennessee game. That was the only game that were really like solid. And Tennessee doesn't have the weapons they used to. This is a game. Rodemaker is going to have opportunities in this game down the field. It's still Johnny Wilson. It's still Keon Coleman. It's still Jaheim Bell. Tofili's been catching the ball. Benson in the screen game. The Gators, I was a little surprised as we got into the year. Graham Mertz played, like, for the most part, really solid, I would say, like B+ football. I thought coming into the year he would kind of be the problem. You go and get a Wisconsin quarterback, bring him down to Florida. I don't know how it's going to look. He was solid this year. I'm not going to take anything from him. You could argue, honestly, he was their best player, which says something, I think, about where the Gators are at. But their defense is actually the issue. And if their defense doesn't play, and I'm going to be honest with you, the desperation factor needs to be high. The bowl game thing, they haven't had, this would be, if they lose one more game, this or bowl game, this would be their 3rd losing season in a row. They haven't had 3 losing seasons in a row, I believe, since the early 40s. It's been 80 years. 80 years since the Gators have had 3 losing seasons in a row. And Billy Napier would be in charge of 2 of them. They got rid of Dan Mullen after 1. You could see this could be one way or another a program defining game for the Gators moving forward. And they badly need this win. But I think Rodemaker is there's a lot more things in this game that set up Rodemaker for success better than Brown. The Gators, really, their one shot is to just be absolutely stellar in the run game.
Yeah, and I think Bill Napier, I don't know if he'd be coaching for his job in this game, but I think a win, obviously, I think would keep him alive for another year.
I'll tell you what, I think he is. I was getting there, but that They had the lead last week, and
Yeah,
Missouri in a fourth and Missouri in a 4th and 17, and the next 4 plays just I I
it's
don't
tough.
I kind of think he is.
Yeah, and obviously a win over a
I
top
kind
five
of think
team, even
so.
on a backup quarterback. But you are on a backup quarterback too, so it's like you kind of even it out in that way. But yeah, man, I think you do.
I don't think after the way their defense has played all year, and the Gators, even in prior down years over the last decade, like say when they had like guys like John Brantley and Felipe Franks and other guys, even Anthony Richardson going 6-6. It's kind of disappointing, right?
Mhm.
Until the last year or two, they never had issues on defense. I remember the Gators in the last decade, like trying to find the offense and the Tebow replacement more, but still playing elite defense and special teams. Where it's like, okay, we won 9 games, defensive, special teams, and quarterback was kind of a struggle. They had Kyle Trask for the 1 year, won 10 games. I've, at least since I've been around, which isn't that long, I've never seen a Florida Gators defense struggling the way they're struggling right now, and it's that, and I think the way last week's game ended, that might play a big part in it. They should have won that game. I know it's Missouri, and we love Missouri here, but man, you get
No,
a
they
team in
lost
a
that
fourth.
game, man. Yeah,
You get a team in a 4th and 17 like that, and you leave Luther Burden standing at the sticks by himself. That's a rough one to come back from. That's a
yeah.
rough one, and to have to come back against this team even without Jordan Travis, that's a tall. It is still, even with Rhoda, it's a tall task for a defense that's been struggling all year.
Yeah, it absolutely is. So I think you made a good point. This is the defense that you want Rodemaker to have his first start against. And then obviously next week he's got Louisville. So it's like that's a defense you don't want to, be throwing a new quarterback in the fire. But hopefully he can build up his confidence enough in this game that he can go into a Louisville game semi-confident. Obviously still going up against a great defense. But yeah, man, it's alarming too because Florida has a couple really good players on their defense. Princely Monmielen has been a star for the last few years now. I think he's a really underrated prospect in the NFL draft, a really underrated edge defender in college football. But Jason Marshall Jr., their corner, I thought he was a top 10 to 15 corner in the country before the season. He's really, he's been fine this year, but they need him to be the lockdown guy. And he just hasn't been that for them this year. So, yeah, it's a disappointing defense, man. And not only a disappointing one, but a bad one at that as well. So, I don't know if I have to ask you, Dalton, do you think Florida State is going to beat Florida in this one? But how badly do you think the Seminoles are going to take down the Gators in this one?
You've got the rivalry factor. You've got the night swamp factor. You've got, I think, the weird factor of Max Brown being a lot different than Graham Mertz. I'm curious to see what the Gators have coming in the run game for this. I think it's still a competitive game. I'm gonna say something like 35-26 Florida State.
Mm,
I still think you've got a boatload of weapons. You got a ton of weapons for Florida State, and you've got a Gator defense. You mentioned like Marshall and what's going on there. They make a lot of mental mistakes. It's
yeah,
not their ability. It's not their ability. They have talented guys. So, it's still defense. They're the Florida Gators, man. They always have talented defensive players. But for them to be the 3rd worst cover team in the Power 5 over the last 7 weeks, they make a ton of mental mistakes. Because usually teams that are that bad in cover, like even it's kind of like I mentioned earlier with UTSA, same thing. Like they have the ability to do this. They
mm-hmm.
just the first half of the season made a boatload of mental mistakes. The Gators have just continued to do that. They
Yeah,
just bad angles, ton of missed tackles last week. It felt like they couldn't make the first tackle for anything. And again, and then if you don't create turnovers, you have the fewest interceptions. You've only got three interceptions all season. It's hard to win like that. You have to force turnovers eventually to be a good defense. But I like Florida State. I'll take them 35-26. I think the Gators' one shot in this game is the run game. But
yeah,
there's just too many factors here that set up Rodemaker for success. As long as he doesn't get like rattled on the road and trying to keep the undefeated thing going. But I think Norvell, I think he's got a good feel in this offense for what's working, what's going to work against this Florida team. Last year, the game was close last year, even with Anthony Richardson going 9 for 27. These games are always close, but I just like Florida State. They're more talented. They're better coached. I like the matchup schematically. Next week, we'll have a real conversation about that. That's going to take a lot of examining them against Louisville with Rodemaker in there, and a lot of it's going to be how he plays this week. You know, Louisville right now, Louisville and Florida's defense, it's not even close.
Yeah.
It'll be a whole different battle. But this is still a team. If you believed before that Florida State has elite weapons, solid backs, very underrated offensive line, and a nasty, nasty coverage unit, they've got all the things they should have to have success. I get where there's a road for the Gators here, but I'm not going down that road.
No, I'm not going down either. I got Florida State winning this 131-23. Now, I do think an interesting aspect of it was Florida State. They've done a lot better recently, but in the beginning of the season, I remember we talked about their big weakness was their run defense, Florida State. They really were not playing well in run defense. Now, again, they fixed it recently. Now they're 42nd in run defense grade, which is not great, but it's still above average. But I think if Florida, can take advantage of that, maybe make the Seminoles look like what they look like early in the season, that's the avenue I think for Florida in this game is we said it every time we do a Florida game is always ride the run game. They finally did it against Tennessee, and that's why they
get
up
ahead early.
Yeah.
Score first. Don't go down 7-0 on the first play of the game. Whatever you do, because it feels like it's just that's the way. If they score first, like they did against Tennessee, we're cool. If we come out like we did against Utah, or they were behind. I mean, Max Brown came in the game. I think they were down, and then they were down 9 late in that game. I mean, they get ahead early.
Win the coin toss, get the ball first. That's a coin toss game again. Yeah. Florida State. I got Florida State winning this one 31-23. I think they survive their first test without Jordan Travis. Got a massive one coming up next week against Louisville in the ACC championship game. But I think Florida State survives and finishes the regular season with an undefeated record. Before we wrap this up, Don, I wanted to ask you about Florida State real quick. Say if we were both wrong. Say Florida does end up winning this game. Do you think Florida State is out of it? Or do you think if they beat Louisville, they would still get in over a Texas or someone like that?
No, a loss to either one takes them out.
Yeah.
We've already seen how they've treated Florida State. To be honest, I'm fully expecting tomorrow that they'll be number 5, that they're going to slide Washington ahead of them. I think we've already seen how they're treating Florida State in these rankings. I don't understand it. I don't get it at all. I've said this whole time. I think you could argue them up to number 2, based on resume and just look. I get it. Every team after they've played Florida State for some reason has fallen apart. They got the poison. They got something. I don't know what they have. I don't know what they have down there, but they still won those games. They beat LSU convincingly. They went into Clemson and won when Clemson was playing arguably their best football. I know they've looked good the last couple weeks too, but like Clemson was playing well, and any win at Clemson's a good win. Beat Duke convincingly when they were ranked, but we've seen how the committee will treat them, and I think momentum is obviously a big factor in this committee's thing right now. Like with Oregon being I still kind of don't know why they're number 6 still over Texas. Or I could argue them down to 8 behind Bama as well.
Yeah, I would.
But they like momentum. They like the eye test. Florida State's one, other than quarterback now, one big flaw for me was just they get off to slow starts. Second half, again, happened last week. Second half of games, they're basically the best team in the country.
Yeah.
The first half of games, they play like a good team. They play like an 8 or 9 win team in the first half of these games. So that's really the one flaw, and that's why it's ugly when you look at a score when you're not watching the game and it's halftime and it's a 7-point game. You go, why are they top 5? And just wait. It's kind of thing. But no, a loss, especially this week, a loss takes them out though, because losing next week, then Louisville's in play, Oregon's in play. There's too much going on. They can't lose a game. Honestly, I think Washington's in the same. All these teams. I think the only team right now that's going to have an argument if they lose a game from here in is going to be Georgia.
Yeah,
they're the only team where I could see something happening where you go, okay, they lost, but we can leave them at number 4, and even then, you're going to be arguing about like with Bama, with Texas, if Oregon wins, if you get like a bunch of upsets it's going to be a disaster. I don't know they might as well expand it this year. I don't know
Yeah.
how. I don't even know how. But I'm assuming you've just got playoff games now, and for Florida State, it's just every week is just a playoff game. It just is now. We're at that point.
Yeah, I think if Georgia loses this weekend, I think they have Georgia Tech this weekend. So if some reason they lose this weekend, I think they still get in with a win over Alabama. I think that's so. They're the only one that can lose this weekend. That I think I still feel good about them.
That'd be a rough loss. I mean, that'd be a. But I'm not even. It's going to sound bad, but I'm not even going to entertain that.
No, I know. I think
Georgia losing this weekend. I don't think Washington's losing this weekend either.
No. But say Wazoo does beat Washington. I think if Washington beats Oregon again, I think they get in though. So
Wazoo's not a good loss, man.
No, I know, but I think
are they 4-7?
Yeah, maybe but I think Washington beat Oregon twice. Then they beat Oregon State. Yeah, I think I don't know.
I think Georgia's the only one with some other, and I think they still need help. Georgia's a tough one. They're the one tough one, but I think anybody beyond that, if you suffer a loss from here out, and you've seen already how they're high on Michigan and they're not that high on Washington and Florida State. I don't think a loss from here in gets anybody in the playoff.
Interesting.
I just don't think so.
Yeah.
I think Georgia's the only one, and that's only if they lose to Bama. If they lose this week, the arguments are going to be off the chain. That's not going to happen though. They're not losing to Georgia Tech.
I think if they lose to Georgia Tech and they beat Alabama, I think you have to put them in no matter what. I think a one loss beating Bama, I think, even if they just screw around, I don't know.
No,
I think that's enough.
There is too much going on there because then you got to put Bama in. I'm sorry, you'd have to put Bama in
if they lose to Georgia.
If Bama beats Georgia.
Oh yeah, they're in. Yeah,
I'm putting them. Well, here's your problem. Here's where the numbers rack. Okay, Big Ten champ. Yep. Whichever. Alabama, Pac-12 champ.
Texas.
And what if Florida State does run the table?
Yeah, Florida State and Texas. Yeah,
you could run it. Even if you're Georgia losing to Bama, you could run out of room. This is why the playoffs are now. You could argue even including Georgia that any team with a loss from here in is done.
Yeah,
even the undefeated teams. It's not. Oh, look. This is right now. You want to imagine an expanded playoff. You have an 8-team playoff right now with Texas floating as this weird ninth. They're the weird one. They're the weird one. There are some teams in this group that need Texas. They want Texas to lose so bad. It's crazy.
Yeah. And we'll see what happens. They might do it this week or next week. We'll see. But I think Florida State, to go back to that, I think Florida State, with the eye test thing and with the fact they are going to factor in Jordan Travis. If they lose a game, if they lose this game, they are going to factor that in. And I think that
I think if they lost the game with Travis, they'd be out. I don't think that matters.
Yeah,
you already see how they're treating them.
But it's even more without Travis because they've done that before, where it's like, okay, you can look at it, and now they have an excuse to leave out Florida State. Whereas right now, if they go undefeated, you have no excuse. You can't leave them out if they go undefeated.
Any loss from any of these 9 teams, the numbers just don't work in their favor because they're all 8 of them are playing each other. Mm-hmm. It's just you've got the quarterfinals over the next 2 weeks.
Yeah,
that's it's just what you have, and then Texas floating in there to ruin someone's day. Maybe like that's just where you're at. You've got the quarterfinals are this and next Saturday, Friday or Friday, whatever day anybody's playing. That's the quarterfinals are now. You kind of sort of have an 18 playoff right now.
Yeah.
You have it just unofficially. Mm-hmm. You do. And then a committee, they've been talking about all these chaos scenarios and all that. I don't even want to see it because I already know. I don't know what the standards are for this committee. I have no idea. But either way, I mean, you've got all these teams win out. Some of them will get in if they win out. Some of them will have to see what happens. I mean, and then you got other stuff. What if Auburn beats Bama for some reason? I know our guy Zach is vouching for it, but
Bama's out. If they lose to Auburn, even if they beat Georgia, I don't know, man. 2-loss Bama would be tough to put in.
No, if they lose to Auburn, they're done.
Yeah, yeah.
They
So
lose
that'll be
regardless. If they lose to either of them, they're done.
no, yeah. If it was, yeah, they can't lose.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's gonna be fun. That's gonna be fun. The next couple weeks are gonna be very, very fun with 9 teams left, and we still have only 4 playoff spots. So it's gonna be very, very fun seeing what shakes out